Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about the demographics. We produce data. We do a lot of data analysis from Census Bureau's data, American Community Survey data, all that. So today's presentation is based on some of the work we do. Demographic shift in Virginia. If I only have 1 minute, what I would say, what I would show. I would show this map, Virginia's changing center of population. So please first look at the small map first. And that shows in the state what that looks like. And then now we blow it up to see 100 years of change from 1940 to what we project to 2040, where the center of population is. So you see the population moving to the Hampton Roads area because of the wars and all the defense spending, population growth, all the job opportunities, all that. And then after the 80, 90, you see the trend of moving upward. The federal spending, Northern Virginia was growing. And for the continuous decades since then, we see the population center moving up and up continuously. And then we expect by 2040, the center of the whole state will be somewhere in Fredericksburg. And so this is the biggest demographic shift, if I only had 1 minute to explain. But since I have more than 1 minute, I'm going to talk about 3 things: size, shape, and the color. So Virginia's population, if we look at the last 100 years and some couple of decades ahead of us, we see it has continually growing from, in 1900 we had less than 2 million population, and now as of now it's about 8.6 million, and we expect to reach less than 10 million by 2040. So that is continuing growing. But the growth rate in this decade, 2010, up to now, 2018 is the latest number we have. The annual growth in each decade, we have reached the lowest since the 1920s. So we are growing, but much slower. What does that look on the state level, on the locality level? So here you see the red color, the orange color, the yellow color. All those shows growth. It's a different growth rate. The red means the faster growth rate, more than 5%. And then pay attention to the gray and the blue. Those are the localities losing population between 2000 and 2008. So pay attention to the blue and the gray and see how that has expanded between 2010 and 2018. So I'm going to play back. Pay attention to the blue and the gray. That's how many localities losing population in the last decade in that 8 years, and that's how many are losing population now. And then see where they are. They are pretty much in the rural areas, southwest, south side, valley, and the eastern shore. And then also look at the growing localities. A lot more grew fast during 2008, the red. And then you see much less. A lot are growing in the yellow color, which is 0 to 10%. So this decade, the localities growing, the number of growing is reduced, and they grow slower. The number of localities that experienced population decline increased. Why is so? When people think about some area growing, some area losing, they immediately think about people moving. They think, okay, a lot of people moving into Northern Virginia, a lot of people live in rural area. That's part of the reason, but that's not the whole reason. A lot of time, it's the natural increase, births and deaths. Babies were born, and then people dying. Each year, Virginia had about 100,000 births, and each year about 60,000 deaths. And now that the birth number have been decreasing each year, and the death number have been increasing because of aging population. So the next slide shows you in 2018, those are the communities, areas with deaths exceeding births. That's a lot. That's a lot. Just think about where you are. If you happen to be in some of those areas, you can see if school needs to be consolidated, program becomes smaller because of the declining school enrollment. That's part of the reason, because people are having fewer births, and then because of aging population, more deaths are occurring each year. And as a result, that contributes to the population decline in an increasing number of areas, especially rural areas. So this will lead to me to talk about the next topic. This is a size we are looking at. What about the shape? What is population shape? So imagine you are going to a family reunion. So you see a couple of elderly, your grandparent, right? Then you have your parent there, your uncle, aunts there. And then there are you, your siblings, your many cousins. And maybe you have children, your siblings have children, and your cousins have children. So think of that. And that would be the shape of a population. It would be very few older people and a lot of young people, right? Think of a family reunion or family picture. That will be the image you have. And that's what the population traditionally was. And this is Virginia population by age in 1900. We are looking at 100 years ago. And then you see the age under 10, 10 to 20, and then on the top over 70. And that's typically the population shape. It should be more young people. Everybody has 2 or 3 children, and that's quickly become a large base. And then as mortality takes life, and then that's why you have fewer people on the top. And now, 2018, we are very thick. We don't really have much shape, right? You see the baby boomers, of course. You see over 70s, that's a lot. That's good news. We live longer. We have more people, we also live longer. But the issue is we are not having a lot of children. Young people, and we talk about millennials, they delay marriage, they delay childbearing, and they may not want to have as many children, or they delay as a result, they can't have as many children as they would like to. So here is what we are. Our shape changed a lot from what typically should be this, if you think of a family. And then now if you think, if I have 3 children, my children, they each only have 1. That immediately becomes very square, right, rather than broad base. And that's our shape of Virginia as a whole. And so talking about the population aging, school enrollment declining, all that has to do with the shape of our population. And this is the state. Next one. Don't try to read all the message for you is to say, well, this is, on the top is the Virginia map, and then we cut it up into 8 regions because they have some shared characteristics. But we try to put that, into a similar shape to show what's the shape of Virginia's each locality. And those are by age. At the bottom is 0 to 5, and then 0 to 4, 5 to 9, and at the top we end at 85 plus. What I want to show here is you see each locality has its unique shape. And that unique shape tells you a lot about why some issues exist or why it's persistent. So on the right hand, we make it into 4 categories. One is called balanced. And basically it says, they are about the same number of older people as the younger people, so that is already pretty good, balanced. And then you have college towns. You see a bar really long along the 15 to 19, 20 to 24, and that would be like Charlottesville, Williamsburg, they will have that age structure. And then you have older, that to me look like a dog face right there. But really it is top heavy. You have a lot more older people than younger people. Young people is down below. You have a lot more older people than younger people. And then the fourth category is a smaller category. It's called young professionals. And that you typically see in Arlington, Alexandria, in Northern Virginia, where you have a lot of young professionals, and then they really stick up. But then they have children, but as their children get to the school age, they move away. So you see the school age children actually, the smaller bars, they have a lot of children, 0 to 4, but then as family mature and the children go to school, they move away. So that gives the shape of young professional. And the Northern Virginia happen to have all 4 types of shapes. You see Arlington right at the upper right corner. You see Fredericksburg over here with a college town feature. You see Rappahannock over here, the third from the second column. That's heavily older population. And then you see Fairfax County on the top third. It's a balanced, sort of like they have about equal number of each age category. So that's the shape of each locality that tells you the story of its population, and that helps you to understand sometimes it is the geology of a population. It takes years to shape, and also takes years to change. Young people, especially in rural areas, tend to move out, and the older people tend to age in place. That shapes its population, heavily top-heavy. And college towns tend to attract young students and all that. That shapes the population in college towns. So every place has its own shape. So the next one is color. Well, in the last session, we talked a lot about blue and purple and all that. That's not the color I'm going to talk about. This is really about race, ethnicity, about diversity. So US right now, well, I'm going to take a quick poll over here. How many people in the audience were born in Virginia? Wow, that's a lot. How many were born outside Virginia? Any others? That's good. Okay, here's the numbers. 100 years ago, 92% of people living in Virginia were born in Virginia. Now, 49% living in Virginia were born in Virginia. 50 years ago and 100 years ago, only 1% of Virginians were born outside the country, foreign born. And now it's 13%. 13% is very close to the national. National is a 13.7. So now Virginia is very representative of national. But 100 years ago, for US was 14.7% foreign born. That was the immigration, also another peak. And Virginia was only 1%. So back then and now, it's very different. So for US experience, immigration flows and all that, for Virginia, this is a really big change from almost none to now at the national level. Racial dot map is a map that our office made a few years ago based on the 2010 census count. So each person is a dot, and then each dot is color-coded by race ethnicity, and then for white, black, Asian, other, and Hispanic. And we produced this map for the entire US, and it's widely used by millions of people for different purposes, because you can zoom in and look at even at neighborhood level what the population composition is. And this is just a screenshot. This is Northern Virginia, and then here is a part of Washington, D.C. You can see how many different color dots are together and how they are still integrated or segregated. So this color of population, there are 3 reasons contributing to this increased diversity. And the first is the immigration we are talking about, right? So foreign-born in Virginia, 42% of foreign-born population is from Asia. Nationwide, actually, is from Latin America. So that's the difference of Virginia versus the US. Latin American, 36%. and they add up to 100%. In terms of top sending countries, Mexico is not. We have a lot of Hispanic population that's from El Salvador. And then the second largest sending country is India, followed by Korea, China, and Mexico. And this top 5 only accounted about 30 to 35% of the population. So there are still 65% are from many other countries. And the second reason of this diversity is the category of what, the definition of what is white, what is black, what is Asian, all that changes over time by the census. So back in 1960, there are only 4 categories: white, black, Asian, and the American Indian. In the 70s, another category was added, that's Hispanic. In 2000, people were, for the first time, allowed to check more than one race category. So then there's a separate tabulation called more than 2 or more races. So how that changed the diversity? I think Virginia or the US is always very diverse. But then when you put people in the box where they can only check one answer, we have this one-drop rule that you are black even though you may have American Indian or white, you are black. And likewise, a lot of who reported white, even though they may be mixed marriage and then is white and Asian, they have to choose one way or the other. So in a way, in the past, the census category limited people what they can choose, and then limit, when we then compare data now and versus then, it's not really that comparable. And here is an example of white population. This is for the US, because data for Virginia was not readily and incredibly available at this level. So the light blue at the bottom is white alone, not Hispanic, and parents native. And that you see from 94 to 2018, it really didn't change much. The blue is white alone, but first or second generation. That means either you yourself came from another country, and say from Germany, or your children were born here second generation, but then parents are not native. That doesn't change a whole lot, right, for these 2 blue colors. What changes a lot is white Hispanic. Hispanic can be of any race. So a lot of them are white, and that's the orange color. And then on the top of that, you see white and another race. That is after 2000, people can pick more than one race. Then you see that growing, even though it's not a lot because it didn't have a lot of number to start with, it grows quite a bit. So this picture just shows what people consider white population. A lot of times they consider just the light blue. And that's why sometimes when you see the report say by 2047, white will be minority. And that's missed the point. There are many who are Hispanic white, who are white and other race category, are also part of white. So if you only look at the blue, especially the light blue, you don't see much change. And then you will see they are going to be, in that sense, majority minority. But how we define or how we perceive what's the population, what's the color of the population, it changes. The category by the Census Bureau changes. How we perceive ourselves changes. So we may not fill in the same answer in the Census 2010 versus Census 2020, because it's self-reporting, and people may change. How you think your child is in which race last census, and this your child fills out his own question, he may think himself differently. So race, the color, is really hard to capture. It's not like age or gender. It's fixed. It's more like a changing definition, and then talking about the diversity, that's the tricky part. So a picture that my colleagues like to show is a family picture of Ted Cruz. He and his wife and the 2 little girls. And people, if you think, okay, what do you think of the race? Everyone's like, oh, white. But by the census definition, 3 of the 4 are Hispanic, and they'll be minority. And you wouldn't think that's a white family. By the census definition, because Ted Cruz is Hispanic, his 2 children are Hispanic, that is Hispanic family. And they are not in, when census look at the white, all that, they are not a part of white, they are part of Hispanic. So all in all is to say, it's this color, the color changes a lot, the diversity changes a lot. How much meaning in it is up to our interpretation. And we need to be cautious when we read reports saying what race is going to be growing a lot, what race is going to drop. There's so many nuances in it. Immigration contributes to diversity. Census category limits some of the interpretation, and how people perceive themselves, the third factor, also change the picture of our color. And since I'm a demographer and the census is coming up, and we are all talking about redistricting, all that, it's important to talk about the census as my final point of this presentation. The census, as you probably know, is the largest mobilization. Everybody needs to be counted. It's not even like a voting. Voting is a voting age population, 18 plus, has to be a citizen. Here, census is every single person, including newborns, including foreign-borns, including everybody, non-citizens, all that. It is a civic duty, and everybody counts, and everybody matters. So this is even more so for census than any other things. And it's very important. It is the reapportionment of House seats in Congress. We all know that. It is also important in terms of allocation of federal funding. So right now, it's more than $675 billion every year, for education, for transportation, for health, for anything. It's based on population and based on the census. Redistricting rely on the census. And it's a foundation, the benchmark for many federal statistics, the crime rates, the teen pregnancy rates, whatever the rates, the denominator is the census number, based on census number. And it's widely used by businesses, governments, nonprofits, by every sectors. And it's really easy to answer. The question is very simple. It only asks you about age, gender, race, ethnicity, number of persons in the house, relationship to the household header, and whether you own or rent home. There's no question about your income, your social security number, or your citizenship or immigration status. And since this is the audience of teachers, I want to mention the census at the school. That's an international program that helps the students to learn some of the statistical as well as some social concept, and also raise students' awareness of civic duty. So if you click on Google Census at the school, you will find information of that. That helps the students to learn about their civic duty, about the census and the statistics at a younger age. So thank you very much.
So I'm with a group called the Virginia Public Access Project. Who's heard of VPAP before? Great. We're a nonprofit, and that we got started basically tracking money in Virginia politics, and we now do election results. We do lobbying, General Assembly information, and to a certain extent, some demographics, which I'll be glad to talk to you about today in the context of redistricting. Which I know is that's a very tough one to teach, and I've got some suggestions on how to go forward. So at vpap.org, we have a special section for civics teachers. But one thing we have on our website, we call it All Politics is Local. And when you come right to the website, there's a big window where you can plug in your address. So this is an exercise you can try in your classroom. Have your students put in their own address. Careful what they might find, but it basically orients the site around them, right? And that's one of the hardest things you have with kids, is trying to figure out what is it for them, what is it for them, what does it mean for them. So if you put in your address, and I put in the address of where we are right now, you get a list of the voter profile of voters in your precincts. So you can find out, what the age distribution is, a demographic point. You can find out how often people in this precinct vote, right? What percentage of voters vote every election they get a chance to? How many only vote in a presidential, and how many just simply never vote? And you can also find out how the students can find out how their precinct voted in statewide elections, to understand what politics means in their community. You can also find out where you vote, and this may be more of interest to high school students, some of whom may be starting to think about, hey, it's not too far, or maybe in fact I do get to vote this year. You can find out where you go to vote. And you can also find out who your elected representatives are. Who is your congressperson? Who is your delegate and state senator? And there's resources there to tell you, you can dive in and find out, okay, what bills does this legislator put in each year? Where do they get their donations? And some analysis of their voting in the General Assembly on legislation. How often do they vote for your party? So it's another little piece of information that they can find out about themselves. And finally, this might be the dangerous part. Just, you might, if you want, ignore the part at the bottom, and that is donors in your neighborhood. So basically, whatever zip code you're in, it will show you who are the political donors giving to all candidates in your neighborhood. And on the left-hand side is the presidential. Who's giving in this neighborhood to Donald Trump? Who's giving to, who gave the $1 to Mr. Yang? So, you can find this out. This is kind of, they might see their parents, they might see someone they know, they might see a teacher, I don't know. But so it's there if you want to, it's an easy way to navigate the website. So it's pretty simple, just go to the home page, plug in your address, and you're off. So let's talk about, I'm going to talk a little bit about, we do some civics workshops in the summer for teachers. We're not exactly sure how that's going to work next year, but we'll let you know. And one of the things we talk about is chart literacy, how to read a graph. And this is something that's a challenge, right? I mean, one of the beautiful things about the Cooper Center visuals up there is the meaning was immediate, right? And everyone understood what this means. And when you're dealing with middle schoolers or high schoolers, that's not always apparent, right? They don't have that kind of experience. So trying to help them understand how to read a map. So if you showed some middle schoolers this map of the U.S. Senate results in 2018, they might look at it and go, okay, who's red? All right, well, okay, that's the Republicans. Well, they look like they did pretty well. That map looks really, there's some blue, but I really see a lot of red. I would say the Republican one. And of course, this is geography. Pittsylvania County is the largest county in the state. It's a big red expanse down along the North Carolina border, but there's not relatively very many people there. No offense to my friends from Chatham or anybody from Pennsylvania, but so we've resized the map, the same results shown where every locality is. Thank you. Everybody, 1, 2, 3. Wow, all right, great. Thank you, Jim. This is, every locality is resized according to the number of votes that were cast. And so you have a situation where Fairfax County comes all the way out to pretty much Stanton and down and takes up where Charlottesville is now. Prince William County kind of takes over the whole eastern shore and the northern neck. Richmond is pushed way over here. Chesterfield's out around Martinsville. So it's you see, a different way of showing where the center of the state is. In the north, it means all this area is compressed. So there's a lot of localities that did vote for Corey Stewart, but some of them are just mere flecks on this map when you look at it by population. So redistricting is a hard thing to teach. It involves a lot of math. It involves politics. It's complicated. So one way to get their attention, and it might be with these Cooper Center maps, is what does it mean for us? What does it mean for us out in Abingdon? Or what does it mean for us in Loudoun? Or what does it mean for us in Hampton Roads? What does this mean for our community? Because votes are power. So what we've seen, and this is the same thing we've seen in the Cooper maps, is as each census comes along, every district has to have roughly the same amount of population. So if you're losing population, the districts have to grow in size, which means some of these districts are going to get pushed away. So that we've seen as the population shifts north, downstate has lost many seats. And in 2001, the same thing happened. You see the population moving upward. One thing to note, just those of you who cover or know Virginia politics a little bit, this was the 2001 redistricting. What was new about that? Does anybody? Who drew the lines? Republicans drew the lines for the first time ever in modern times. The Democratic leaders were in Roanoke and in Norfolk, and they had kind of things rigged up so that they had some districts that had low population, so they could keep their power, and the Republicans took care of that pretty handily. And then in 2011, the same thing. And we're going to see that in 2021. We might even see more seats move up. This is just the House, not the Senate. So, what does this mean? And that might be a way to start the conversation, right? Particularly if you're in a rural area. What does this mean for us? This is an important thing. Everyone in this community should be concerned that we're losing power, we're losing our voice in Richmond, or our voice is diminishing in Richmond. Or, if you're in Loudoun County, what does it mean? We are now, people have said for years that, if there's a sleeping giant, this sleeping political giant in Northern Virginia, and if only they wake up and realize their power, it's going to be a new day in Virginia. And now we're looking at a General Assembly this next year where every leader, the top leaders in the House and Senate, are all live north of the Occoquan River. It is going to be a new day. So that's one way to get into it. There's also some resources on our website that there's some games where you could divide your team into the green team and the purple team, and just challenge them to come up with rig the districts up the best they can for themselves, and just see kind of how that works. So that's a way to get in that. But this also talks to that population shift and where the power is going. So in looking ahead, this is a map of Virginia by Senate districts, and we don't have all the demographic information that the Cooper Center has necessarily, but we do have voter registration information. And using voter registration as kind of a proxy for population, you can see again where the dark, I don't have a legend, but these colors out here, the cooler colors, I guess we'll call them, these are districts that are losing voters over time, and the ones that are gaining voters are right up here. So that's a prelude to what to expect in 2021 in terms of the population. So those are my slides. I hope, Dave, I don't want to get in front of your group and their great lunch that you have for them.
15
but
more minutes.
We got some minutes time for.
Could you do one thing for us?
Sure.
Just explain, David, under redistricting, how the courts have ruled that what might be legal is putting, for political purposes, you can redistrict, putting more of one party in a district than another. That that's how that's legal, but that packing people by race is not. Could you just explain a little bit about how that works?
Sure, I'll be glad to, Senator. And that's, I think, earlier this morning, Quentin Kidd talked about this a little bit. But it's pretty complicated, and I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but here's the trick. That under the Voting Rights Act, they have to take race into account, right? The Voting Rights Act was to reverse years, decades of systematic discrimination and taking people's voice away. So in order to address that, when the courts do redraw the lines, they absolutely have to take race into account. And the rule is now that when you have a black majority district, you can't change the district in a way that would make it less possible or less likely for the people that are the majority in that district to have a voice to elect one of their own representatives. So what happened in Virginia was, and to use the illustration, I hope I'm answering the question you asked. In 2011, the Republicans in the House, they had the power to redraw the lines. And they had also a Republican governor, so they were not encumbered in any way by the threat of veto. What they did was they took, all of the African American majority districts, and they set the percentage of votes, or population rather, at 55% black in those districts. And so that was approved by the Justice Department under the Obama administration. We went forward, a lawsuit came forward where the Democrats said, that's not fair, you've unfairly kind of packed densely blacks in these districts, which diminished their say in surrounding districts. And so what the courts ruled was, and this is, again, I'm not a constitutional scholar, they said that because they set this arbitrary 55%, which in some cases was higher than it was before, without providing any explanation or justification for that, they took race too much into account. So it's like you have to take it into account, but you can't take it too much into account. So the court ruled that these districts were unconstitutionally put together, and that they had to basically redraw the lines so that some of the black voters were distributed out into surrounding areas. And that's what happened. The legislature, it was the legislature and the governor could not agree. They didn't really even try. They knew Governor Northam would veto it. And so it was turned over to the courts. They brought in an expert who drew them in a way that some of the districts were more, the Democrats in this process put forward a couple plans, and a couple of Republican leaders like Kurt Cox and not Petersburg, Colonial Whites, big difference there, and Chris Jones in Suffolk, they kind of gave them a little tougher district, but it was nothing like what this independent expert did. He made those districts incredibly, they went from a really pretty strong Republican to pretty strong Democratic. So in the results, in the House, the Democrats right now, if there's not a recount, if a recount doesn't overturn one district in Virginia Beach, the Democrats won 6 seats, and 4 of those were seats that had been altered by redistricting. So that was the huge difference maker in this, in this election. So what we're probably going to see, Senator, is, whoever draws the lines, however that happens, there's always a lawsuit from the other side. We'll probably see more litigation because basically the way it works, it's a winner-take-all kind of thing. It wasn't quite that way in Virginia in 2011 with the Senate. The Democrats were in charge of the Senate, but they were constrained by a Republican governor who, in fact, vetoed their first plan and they had to come back with a plan that he would, that would pass the governor's veto. So it did put some constraints. But basically, because it is a winner kind of take all situation, that the losers, the only way they can change things or have a say is really through a different branch of government, through the courts, to try to overturn. And it happens every decade. And in this case, it was a lawsuit that was successful and was decisive in the elections this year. That was a long answer.
Yeah,
Sorry. And questions from the audience? Yes.
On average, like how many people are supposed to be in each House district versus a Senate district?
So that, well, I'll try. I'm used to be good at mental arithmetic. The House is really easy. In 2010, there was 8.5 million, approximately. 8.5 million Virginians.
I think it was 8.2.
But then the voter population will be much, probably 5.8.
Okay. But if it was, let's just say it was 8.2 million. So every House district divided 182,000 people in the House. And the Senate would have 2.5 times that. So that's like 160, like 180, 190,
No,
200.
We cracked
210?
about 2.5, I think.
205,000 in each Senate district. So that's the essence of reapportionment, which is you take the population and you divide it by the number of legislative districts you have, and basically every district, and there's a little, you have a little variation, at least in the state, between, it doesn't have to be right on the number, but it has to be really kind of close to the number. 1% is the rule. Yes?
About the news service.
Oh, okay. My publicist over here has reminded me that VPAP, I just should put in a plug, we have, in addition to our website and all the visualizations and the data, we have a service called VA News. Who reads VA News? All right, wow. Okay, so we have somebody that gets up before dark 100, and they go through every online newspaper and every online news outfit, and they pick out the stories that day, and it goes out in an email about 7:15. And if you haven't subscribed, go to vpap.org, hit the subscribe button. We've got 14,000 people reading it. A lot of teachers are reading it. It's a quick scan. It's like, I know that, don't need to know that. And it's like, whoa, you come across a story, it's like, what's going on there? And then you can click on the headline, and if you don't hit a paywall, you can go read the full story. But it's a great way to know what's going on in your community, and also the rest of the state. It's a big state, and some of the issues that are important to you and are going on, maybe there's a school redistricting in your community. Well, there's a similar issue being faced by somebody else, and how are they dealing with it there? And so anyway, I encourage you to sign up at vpap.org. Any other questions? And for Qian or me?
I have a comment.
Okay. You want
For those of you who have they can all hear me, I think. For those of you who have been to more than one, you know that every time we have David and his group come in and make presentations. And the reason for that is that, which those of you who have already used this material know how invaluable it is in your civics and history and government, U.S. Virginia government classrooms. So what I would ask you to do is pony up each year a little bit of money. They are nonprofit. Doesn't have to be a lot, but give them a little something every year that you use it. Think about it.
Wow, that's great. And how about everybody, that Yang guy? Everybody just give VPAP a buck. That's all. No, but my wife was a teacher, and I know that teachers ain't getting rich. So, but if you do have a rich aunt, and she has a foundation and she needs to support a good group, have her support the Cooper Center and VPAP. Okay. Any questions for us? I think it's lunchtime.
All right, David.
All right.
Thank you very, very much.